Hello, everybody, and welcome. We're here at the City of Shoreline Natural Yard Care webinar series, and we're just getting started here. So we'll give people a minute or two to log on. Thanks so much for being with us tonight instead of at the other event happening right now. So we'll give folks just a minute or two to log on while we get set up here. So welcome. And if you're new to Zoom and you're having technical difficulties, feel free to reach out via the chat button or the QA, and we'll try to help you as best we can. You should see a chat, little speech bubble box at either the top or the bottom of your screen in Zoom. We'll give people just a minute or two here to log on. And Reingard, is your audio working?
Yes, it does. Can you hear me? I was just about to text you.
I can hear you great. That's coming through clear.
Perfect.
So we can hear both of you, which is full success. Awesome. We'll give people just about a minute to log on and then we'll get started. If you're looking for the Talking Dirty Natural Yard Care webinar, you're in the right place. If not, but you want to learn about gardening and how to build your soil, then stick around. You're in for a treat. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Welcome if you're just joining us. My name is Cameron Reed, and I am the Environmental Program Specialist here at the City of Shoreline. This webinar is funded with a grant from yes, it sounds like I had some audio trouble, but okay, I think people can hear me. So this grant workshop is funded by a grant from the Hazardous Waste Management Program in King County, and they seek to reduce hazards to the community from toxic chemicals that are in a lot of different products that you can buy, such as cleaners or a lot of yard care products. They help us find safer alternatives and then safely dispose of the ones that we already have. So big shout out and thank you to them for helping make this happen. And tonight I'm really excited to have Reingard Reiger and Laura Motter from the Garden Hotline here with us to talk dirt. So we're gonna learn how to use compost, mulch, and soil amendments to create a thriving landscape, literally from the roots up. So Laura is the Natural Yard Care Program Director at Tilth Alliance. And Tilth promotes natural gardening methods to support our environment and help us conserve resources. The Garden Hotline, if you don't know about it, it's a great free resource for King County residents. You can call them up during business hours, Monday through Saturday, and get expert help on really just about anything gardening related. So just an awesome resource, and we'll share out in a follow-up email, we'll share out a bunch of resources, including that number. And so soil, I'm actually super passionate about this. Soil is an amazing topic. As we'll learn tonight, you know, good gardeners, there's a saying that good gardeners don't grow plants, but they grow soil, and the soil grows plants. So, and there's really an incredible connection between people and the soil. There's been some studies that have found in good, healthy, dark colored soil with lots of organic matter that's just loaded with life. And actually when you handle it and when you smell it, there's a type of bacteria that releases endorphins in the human brain. So pretty interesting just how deeply connected and crucial soil is to sustaining life. There's other studies about how crops grown on healthy soils with lots of organic matter and the thriving microecosystem have higher nutrient densities and a wider range of micronutrients than crops grown on poor soils where the yield is, you know, sort of boosted up artificially with fertilizer inputs. So it's, you know, when we're talking about our gardens and our landscapes and lawns here at home, It's really the same principle. So healthy soil is key and the best way to make healthy, thriving plants. Then on the other hand, you have sort of the quick fix approach of synthetic chemical fertilizers and pesticides. And really, that's trying to make up for something for not having good quality soil in the first place. And it doesn't really get to the root of how to create healthy plants. Also, we're just finding more and more that there's a whole host of negative spillover effects from these products. So, they're toxic to aquatic life, like our salmon and our orca. When they run off in the rain from our lawn and gardens, they're harmful to pollinators, to other wildlife, and even to our pets. And then they're toxic to us too. So actually, if you have a bottle of pesticide or lawn care product that has the words caution, hazard, danger, or warning, it's actually toxic enough that we don't want it in the garbage, but it needs special and safe handling. So, just think about that. If it's something we don't even want the garbage and then we're just spreading it around on the landscape, it's not a good situation. So after hearing the talk today, if you want to commit to going natural and pesticide free, I have these pesticide free zone signs. They're a great way to make your commitment visible. And I'll send out the link. You can just type in your address and request a sign. We'll mail it out to you. Okay, that's the end of my spiel. Now to some fun stuff. We also have some awesome giveaways for tonight. So I have a bunch of weed pulling tools that are really great at getting out dandelions and other deep-rooted tap weeds. I have some worm castings, which is an awesome organic soil amendment. Really good stuff made here locally. And then grand prize, one of you lucky folks, with the caveat that you have to be a shoreline resident, will receive have the opportunity to receive 1 yard of Cedar Grove organic compost delivered to your home. So huge kickstart and boost to your landscape there. And before I turn it over to Reingard, I just have a couple housekeeping things. So we're gonna go till about 7:45, and then we will take questions at the end. So we should wrap up around 8 o'clock. You can there's a QA button in Zoom. So use the QA as we go, you're thinking of your question, type it into there, and we'll keep track of it and then bring those questions to our presenters at the end. There's also a little thumbs up button. So if somebody already asked your question, you can like it, and that will bump it to the top of our list to make sure we get it asked. Also, we are recording. Just confirming that. Yeah, so we're recording, and I'll send out the recording video with all the links and resources we mentioned in the follow-up email tomorrow. So look out for that, and don't feel like you have to scribble notes super rapidly. So before I get started, real quick, I'm just gonna do a little poll exercise to see who's here with us. So you should be seeing a little icebreaker poll coming up. So please just take a quick minute to fill that out, just so we can see who's here with us, and yeah, helps us kind of gauge how our programs are doing. So just take a quick minute and fill out those polls. And the last question is about compost, whether you compost at home, because at the end of this presentation, we'll also learn about some tips for home composting. We'll give people just about a minute to fill out the poll here. People like another 20, 30 seconds here. So just want to see who we have with us tonight, kind of a little bit about your gardening practices and composting. Awesome, thank you. Give people just 10 more seconds here. Awesome. Okay, speak now or forever hold your peace in this webinar. Until the next poll. Awesome. Thank you, everybody. All right. Without further ado, I will hand it over. Laura, if you want to share your screen, we'll have Reingard present for us here. And Reingard, I apologize. I don't know your title at TILF, but Reingard works with Laura at TILF Alliance.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I just wanted to check because of our funky setup today. Can you hear me okay again? Wonderful.
I can hear you.
So my name is Reingard. I am the project manager for the Master Composter and Sustainability Steward program at the TILF Alliance. And I'm working under Laura, who is going to help us today by help me today by just clicking through the slides today, and then she will chime in whenever she feels that there's something to add to what I have to say. I just wanted to thank you for the wonderful introduction, Cameron. You hit on a lot of really wonderful points already right there. So that's great. Yes. And those raffle prizes, oh my gosh, worm castings and compost. Definitely fits our talk today. So thank you very much. And gosh, someone's going to be a lucky winner there. So today we're going to talk about soil. Even though it says talking dirty, we're talking about soil. And in the next slide, actually, we will talk about what is soil. What is soil, and how is it different from dirt? Right? Why do we have two words for that? So on the screen there is a very technical description of what soil is. This one is pulled from the Soil Science Society of America. And one thing they're saying is essentially that, you know, it's a mineral or organic material on the surface of the earth that serves as a medium, natural medium for the growth of land plants. So pretty much everything that's not water. And then there are a couple other examples of even more detailed technical descriptions. And in the next slide, I will talk to you about what is the difference between dirt and soil, right? So we say to kids, don't play in the dirt. We never say don't play in the soil. One of the differences is that dirt is basically the non-organic material, the minerals, the sand or silt or clay. Most of us have a mix of that in our garden soils. And then soil adds to that organic matter and soil life. Usually it's about 90% mineral particles or more, and about 5 to 10% of organic matter and soil life. And here, as a screen pops up, the other thing that we should probably mention at this point is loam is a term that we use for a mix of sand, silt, and clay and organic matter that's formed over time by nature. And so that's like the ideal soil is a loamy soil. And in addition to that, those organic, tangible particles, mineral particles and organic matter, soil also needs air and water. And actually, a healthy soil has about 50% of those hard parts and 50% of air pockets, which can be filled with water. And that is very much needed by the soil life that is living in the soil. The next slide is going to show us again the basic mineral parts of soil. Sand and silt and clay, I already just mentioned that. And basically, those are the minerals that make up the soil. And it's three very different sizes. fine sand is like way bigger. And actually on that screen, the examples and the description are flipped. So obviously clay is the tiniest and the sand is the biggest. So you can see how much of a difference there is in size. The image next to it is a jar, and I'll get back to that later in the talk. This shows a jar that we can use to test our own soil. This here is just an example of how that would possibly show up for your sample. And what this tells us is what soil texture we have, how much sand do we have, or even small gravel pieces, how much silt do we have, and how much clay, and then on top of that will be water in our test sample there. The next slide will get us to a beautiful image of soil structure. Now, soil texture is, that's something we just get. We can't really influence that. We don't have much control over how much sand we have compared to clay in the soil that we're working with or playing with. Because that's just a given. It's impossible, pretty much. I mean, you would need to bring in tons of sand or tons of clay to make even a tiny little dent. So that doesn't make sense. But what we can very much influence is the soil structure. We can influence that a lot. And soil structure, if you look at this image, you can see how it's kind of holding together, and there's a lot of little root materials and fungal strands in there as well. Pieces of plants, it looks like there's a little stick, maybe a little stem of something. Somewhere in there, I'm sure, is an earthworm or maybe a couple. And there's a lot of unseen soil life, lots of microbes that help change this mineral mix of dirt into a living soil. As these creatures are living in the soil, they excrete. They make slimy components. Worms, for example, make tunnels, and they add, I kind of picture it like slugs, those little slug trails that we see oftentimes. Earthworms do something somewhat similar, not exactly biologically, but similar in function. And so those, as a tunnel through the soil, and so that those substances, those natural biological substances, are starting to create this soil structure that is healthy. And when we look at an example like in this picture, we say that this is a soil with good tilth. So let's jump to the next one. This is a collection of images that shows you all the different kinds of examples of all the different kinds of soil creatures. We call it the soil food web because they depend on each other, they feed on each other, they support each other, they fight each other, just like above ground. And it's such a wide variety of creatures that are living in the soil, anything from bacteria and fungi to nematodes, all kinds of arthropods. We have protozoa in there, and then of course earthworms, and also like moles and voles sometimes, and larger critters as well. Let's jump to the next slide. So I touched on that already. I already mentioned, healthy soil. So that example that I showed for soil structure is an example of a healthy soil. If you look at these two images there, you can see on the top that runoff, that shiny, oily sheen there. If that is being absorbed by a healthy soil, then that soil can actually buffer a lot of that. And it would not actually go out into, in our case, one of our lakes or even Puget Sound. Healthy soil also contains a lot of nutrients, so it reduces the need for chemical fertilizers. It also reduces the need for pesticides because healthier plants are more resilient. A healthy soil also holds on to water really fairly well. The healthier the soil, the better it does that. So if you improve the health of the soil, you would also, at the same time, you will reduce the need to irrigate. And, you know, a typical example of a soil that doesn't hold water much at all is a fairly sandy soil because it just runs right through the sand particles. Adding compost and organic matter will actually help holding that water, and so that will help you be able to grow better. The healthy soil will also filter all kinds of pollutants. In our area, most of that is, you know, urban pollutants from just our everyday life. I mean, anything from, like, you know, what comes off of car tires to oil spills, even tiny little drops here and there. All that, a healthy soil can absorb that and filter that, and that way it won't run out into, it just won't run off as part of stormwater, and therefore won't end up in the in our lakes or in Puget Sound. And then on the climate change topic, healthy soil comes off up oftentimes as well when people talk about that, because a healthy soil also stores carbon from the atmosphere, so it actually helps cool down and store the carbon from the atmosphere. So let's see what the next slide says. Well, here's the opposite of what we just looked at disturbed soil and compacted soils. These are examples from the website that we are sharing with you in the resources actually at the end. It's a website called Soils for Salmon because of that connection between the soil quality and our Puget Sound. And that website has information for builders and developers. So if you or someone you know is building, this website provides information to the builders and the contractors on how to minimize how much damage is being done during that building process of a house or you know, a business building or something. These examples are actually quite drastic, and honestly, I mean, as you can see from the photo quality, they're kind of old. And our area here has made a lot of progress in that area, so you won't see that kind of damage done nearly as often anymore as was, you know, pretty commonplace. The bottom left picture, for example, I don't know if you can make that out on your screen, but it shows just how much of the topsoil has been taken off. And the topsoil, of course, is the healthy soil that has all the organic matter and the soil life in it. So basically, what's left is a pretty much dead subsoil. In the past, these subsoils were then used to fill. So in Seattle, in the city of Seattle, which I know you're north of us, but all those hills that have been moved around, you know, like all that fill is like you don't know what's been, you know, what's under there. And of course, compaction through this heavy machinery is a problem because what happens through compaction is those air pockets that I mentioned earlier are being destroyed. And with that, those microbes and also plant roots can't like navigate anymore because there's just not enough room physically, and there's not enough air pockets to provide the oxygen they need. There's not enough room for the water to go into the soil. So we really want to make sure that we avoid that. But we can fix that also by adding more organic matter again and change, you know, over time, improve the quality of our soils again. In the next slide, we will very briefly touch on manufactured soils, so man-made soils. Most of what I'm talking about today is about soils that are natural. But there is such a thing as man-made soils as well, and so those are made by us and not made by nature over time. And they can be made of a lot of different materials. Oftentimes it's a mix. Sometimes they come from construction sites, like the examples I just mentioned earlier. That topsoil is moved away, and then other stuff is brought in. And depending on what the materials are that are used for making these soils, they could even be certified organic. They do have their place for sure, because there are situations where we really would like something like that. Green roofs are a good example, actually. If we have a roof garden, which are becoming more and more popular around here, then we need a soil that's really fairly lightweight, and so a manufactured soil can actually help make that happen. So now let's see what the next slide is. Okay, so we're going to switch to talking about soil testing now, and soil testing is really a very good tool for us to understand what we're dealing with. So if we can, we would like to take soil tests and sample and understand what we're actually working with. What is the soil in our backyard or front yard or another place that we might use for gardening. Knowing what we have in terms of this, what soil we have helps us determine the soil health that we're dealing with. It helps us understand what nutrients we have in there, what quality nutrient-wise our soil has, where do we maybe need to add something. We can also get information from a soil test about what we might need to add. And another kind of soil test could also help us if there's any toxin issues. Do we have any, heavy metals, for example? That's pretty common around here. Do we have heavy metals in our soil? We definitely want to know that if we are going to grow food for ourselves. And so that's definitely something that can be tested for. Most of the houses that are built before the late 70s, have been using lead paint, for example. So that would be a good reason to make sure that you test before you either have like kids play out there, or before you have before you decide to put your vegetable garden right in that spot. Old orchard sites sometimes are actually an issue as well. And then, of course, industrial sites either immediately like substations or auto shops, or even like auto paint, shops. Cement plants can also have, if you're downwind of a cement plant, you might want to test. And then, in our area, the Puget Sound area, the smelted plume from Tacoma, that is definitely something to be aware of. There are maps out there to see if, like, what kind of risk level your particular neighborhood will be in. And then also along busy highways, because with all the, the rubbing off of materials, the lead from gasoline from years past and all that could potentially be an issue. So let's look at the next slide. So before I jump into this, just one thing, like what I was just pointing out is like, those are things to be cautious about. I don't want to scare you too much, but if you happen to be falling into, falling into one of those groups where that I mentioned as a caution, then you might want to follow up on that. So testing our soil is actually really easy. It sounds difficult because it takes the laboratory oftentimes to do the testing, but it's not difficult to do ourselves. One thing that we can actually do all ourselves, we don't even need to send that anywhere, is the char test. So remember when I was talking about the soil texture, I showed that char actually with the layers of the clay and the silt and the sand. That is something that we can easily do ourselves with a simple mason jar. We scoop out a little bit of soil. We take away the organic matter, the top, the grass, for example, and then mix that soil up and put it in a mason jar, mix it with water and a drop of soap, dish soap, and shake it, and then let it sit, and it'll settle into different layers, and that will give a pretty good idea of like, do you have more sand or do we have more clay? And it's really worth doing. I remember the place that I moved to about 12 years ago, I at first thought that I had heavy clay soil, most likely to work with. And it was only because it was so compacted that I thought that was the condition I had. And it wasn't until I actually, took a shovelful and tested it that I realized that actually I have quite a bit of sand in here. So it's worth to take a closer look, because sometimes our first impressions deceive us. And then, of course, there are tests for nutrients and toxins, like I mentioned already, and those we send to a laboratory. Labs are using standardized processes to test for those, either the toxins or the nutrients or micronutrients in our soil, and then we get the test results back with recommendations oftentimes. And we're really lucky in our area here, because anyone in King County can get 5 free soil tests per household. So the King Conservation District, and the website is listed here on the slide, and again in the resource list as well at the end. They allow every household to either send 5 tests in at once, or what makes most sense for most of us, that's like a free test once a year for 5 years. That's pretty good. And they collect it and they send it to a laboratory and help you with the they will send you the test results and the recommendations back as well. And I also want to point out that that their website has really good information. They have a video, so when you like after the talk and you're like, okay, I really want to do this, you feel unsure about how to go about it, go check out their video. They show step by step how to do the chart test. And they also have information in that video, and also more information on the website about how you go about taking the samples, so that that you will end up with a meaningful test in the end. And if you do get the test results back, or if you still have a question as you're doing the testing, then you want to remember that the Garden Hotline is always available for you. So. And now I was jumping to the next slide, and that's perfect timing. So now we're going to talk in more depth on about the mulch and the soil amendments and compost. So let's go to the next one and start with mulches. So so far we're talking about soil. Mulch is what we it's a layer of material on the soil that we put usually ourselves put on the surface of our soil. It can be all kinds of materials. It could be leaves, it could be wood chips, it could be needles, grass clippings, sawdust, bark, straw, burlap, cardboard, compost. Permeable pavers, in a way, would fall into that as well. So this photo there shows leaves in the fall, how they're covering a gardening bed, ornamental bedding, garden bed quite nicely. A thick layer of very fluffy leaves. Wood chips are another option that is very available to all of us here, because there is just we have a lot of trees, and wood chips are available for free also through Chip Drop. Conifer needles, I mean, they, please just drop the needles. So if you happen to have a tree that provides that, then that will be a good resource. Grass clippings, especially in the spring, but also sometimes in fall, there's another couple weeks where we end up having to mow. Grass clippings are great. They provide a lot of nutrients. We don't want to put them up too thick, but they're definitely a great resource. And then you can buy some things that buy in bulk oftentimes, a sawdust manure blend. And so those are nice to make something look really nice and neat, but sometimes they can add up. We also oftentimes get bark offered for sale, and that is something I would caution you against, actually. Bark is actually repellent of water, so what we want to achieve with mulch and with improving the organic matter in our soils is to make it more absorbent of and holding better of water, and so bark is doing the opposite of that. So I would not recommend bark. Straw is not as also not as available to us right here in the rest of the Cascades, but it's definitely a good mulching material as well. Burlap sacks with all the coffee places we have around here and a lot of coffee roasters. If you can get your hands on burlap sacks, that's definitely a great material, especially this time of the year, to cover beds that you want to overwinter without having anything else growing on them. In the bare soil, you want to put burlap or cardboard or compost on. So definitely cover up your soil. Let's jump to the next slide. This so I just listed a long list of examples of mulch. The reason we do mulch is it adds organic matter for one. It helps moderate the soil temperatures, so it buffers the cold in the winter, it buffers the heat in the summer for the soil microbes, the earthworms, and all that. So that means that they won't grow down as deep. It's definitely it keeps weeds at bay. It conserves moisture for the same reason that it tempers soil temperatures. It also supplies nutrients depending on what you put on. The mulching is a way of influencing the kind of nutrients you add to your soil. And it also, because it's fluffy material, it prevents the soil from compaction and also losing nutrients. You're adding nutrients, you're not losing them. It looks nice, and that matters. And it can also be a habitat for beneficial insects and birds. So let's look at the next one. I touched on this briefly already that, wood chips are available for free easily through a website called getchiptrap.com. It's also in our resource list. That's another huge benefit of mulching materials is that a lot of it you can just get for free. That green texture up there is actually for my garden. I did that this spring. I was mowing my lawn and I used my grass clippings to just cover the soil underneath and between my pea plants, my baby peas there. And so, if you have a piece of lawn that you're mowing, you have free mulching material right there. And leaves, of course, especially this time of the year. Coffee grounds, burlap, definitely choices as well. I'm definitely, there's a pile of wood chips. So one thing I want to point out is that for ornamental gardens, if you have more woody plants and more of a perennial kind of, shrubs and trees, you want to use more woody mulch. So wood chips, a wood manure plant maybe, leaves, compost for sure. And you want to add those in the fall. The next couple of weeks is perfect timing for that. And if you want to suppress annual weeds, you might want to top that off in the spring. Anytime you have soil that is bare, you can put a thin layer of mulch on. That will be beneficial for sure. So all these woody mulches are ideal for trees and panels. If you are mostly growing vegetables or maybe have an annual flower bed that you want to keep, then you put in things that are a bit richer in nitrogen. So straw, leaves, compost are okay, but also, you know, those grass clippings. If you just want to cover it temporarily, burlap is great. Cardboard would work also. And if you keep the beds, if you don't plant anything over the winter months, then you want to put a layer of mulch on later in fall once you pull all your vegetable plants or your flowers, for example. So okay, next. Yeah, I think I pretty much touched on this. How to mulch. These guys are using have a big compost pile there that they're going to spread. Fall is great. I mean, this is perfect timing for this talk. The next couple of weeks are going to be the best time to do this. And then again, anytime your soil is bare, you want to cover it with something. And then again, early spring, if you have weeds emerge, putting a layer of mulch over that could help. That depends on the weeds you have and your particular situation. In the fall, you can put in you can put on like 1 to 3 inches, especially if they're very fluffy leaves, like in that image earlier. That would be 3 inches would not be too much at all. So let's move on to the next slide. Yes, this is one of my favorites here. It's like what not to do. Definitely be careful when you're applying things. You know, like I was saying, woody mulch for woody plants, but you need to keep it away from the tree trunks. They're called mulch volcanoes because that's kind of what they look like, and you really want to avoid that. If you have trees, you want to keep a little ring right by the tree, what's called the tree flare. The bottom of the tree, right around that soil, you want to keep that free of organic matter, because as those mulches break down, those processes could actually harm the tree, and also moisture would just like be. It could be just getting too moist there. So you do not want to do what's shown in this picture. This is a don't do. And then also what this image mentions briefly is the beauty bark. And like I mentioned earlier, it repels water. So it's really not ideal for what we're trying to do. And you can probably find better suited materials for less money or for free. So yeah, avoid bark if you can. Next, please. Totally different way to go about it is one of my favorites, chop and drop. This is one of my coworkers actually in action doing this. Right there, she's using a cover crop that she's cutting down, but you can do that with anything else. If you're pruning off leaves or flower heads or little twigs of a plant, or you're taking out a plant for whatever reason, you can cut it into smaller chunks and drop that material right then and there, and you have a mulch that you didn't purchase. It has the nutrients you need because the plant, it's, you're just giving what you took out or what the plant took out right back to that soil in that place. That's a great way to overwinter plants, and it works really well in ornamental gardens. It can look really beautiful, actually. I once had a camellia plant where I did that, where I took out some of the more gangly branches, and I just arranged that underneath, and it looked so beautiful because when the flower drops fell on it, and it was gorgeous, and I didn't have to move anything away at all. The one thing to avoid is if you have a plant that's deceased, then you don't want to do this because you don't want to perpetuate that problem. But other than that, chop and drop is a wonderful way to go. And so I highly recommend it. You'll love it. So next, another favorite of mine is sheet mulching. This is a way to mulch, for example, to remove lawns or prepare a bed for or an area for planting something later. This is a very easy process. It doesn't involve a lot of tools. It doesn't involve much heavy lifting at all. And so it's something that most of us can easily do, and it's affordable too. On the one picture, you see newspapers on the bottom, and then wood chips on top. That's a way to go about removing a larger area of lawn, for example, with newspapers and or cardboard. Newspaper actually takes a little longer to break down than cardboard, and so it can help like make this process a little more. Yeah, what I like to do is I like a layer of newspaper and then cardboard, and then some wood chips, for example, on top of that. The other image here shows how you could do this in a bed where you're planting to keep to establish the bed and keep the weeds at bay in between the plants that you intend to grow there. So that's another way to go about that. Next slide, please. This is actually the same location as the picture that I showed earlier with my coworker Selena there. Another way to mulch is to use cover crops. This would also be a good time of the year to plant cover crops. Cover crops are planted with intention of protecting the soil from the rains that are going to come in fall and winter, or to add nutrients. They also help aerate the soil once, for the root growth. They hold the soil in place better. They prevent, they're a buffer layer for, when the heavy rains come and they, drop on drop hits the bare soil. If you have a living cover crop there, they buffer that. And at the same time, they hold in the moisture better because of the root system. And if you use a cover crop or a mix with seeds from the pea family, some of the legumes like vetch or Austin Fields peas, for example, then they will also add nitrogen as you're going through that process of first planting them, and then you cut them back and you root that into your soil in spring. Or if you let it grow, then you'll have, you might have, depending on where you're sowing, you might have flowers in the spring that can attract pollinators that are beneficial to your other plants in the garden. So let's jump to the next slide. Yeah, I think you can jump over this because I was talking about that. These are two images of sowing the seeds and then in the spring working it into the soil and on top of the bed a little bit as a protector. This is a plant that was later planted with vegetables, so they were creating those rows of plant material and we're planting in between. So this slide, I'll touch on this very briefly. This is a selection of useful tools for when you're working with compost or mulches. I'm personally a big fan of forks. I like working with forks, especially in the soil, much more than shovels because it's lighter on my body. It's easier on my body, better on my back. And they also, I feel like I'm not risking that I destroy as much. It's like with the shovel, I can accidentally cut through either a plant root or maybe an earthworm, much more likely than with a fork. And then, if you want to collect your leaves, rake them up with a light rake. Pruners for your chop and drop. Wheelbarrows are great or something similar to move materials around, because then you don't have to do the heavy lifting. And then if you want to, then there's a size shown as well. So those are all good tools to use. See what you have already, and if you do add something to your collection, I recommend considering a fork. And so yeah. So the next topic we're going to talk about is compost. Compost is a word a lot of us are using, and like many other technical terms, it can have a lot of definitions. I like this one because it's simple and right to the point. Compost is plant material that's broken down biologically in the presence of oxygen. So it's, of course, a process that nature is doing automatically without us ever doing anything to that. And when we talk about compost, rather than just natural, like if you look at the forest, like where nobody has been, no human has been, plant material will break down naturally. When we talk about compost, we talk about this process being intentionally made possible or created or initiated by humans. So in a way, it's us farming microbes. Microbes are doing that. They are the ones who break down the organic materials. So let's dig in and let's look at the next slide. Yeah, here's a couple more photos of microorganisms that you could find in a compost pile. Again, what we're doing is when we make a compost pile or make compost, we create the conditions so that these microorganisms can do their job. So they're actually the ones who make the compost. That's all I have to say here. Let's jump on. Yeah, this slide is talking about amending the soil. We touched on that a little bit, so let's keep going. Using compost, since I touched on that. Whoops, we're gonna go back to compost. Thank you. I just wanted to touch on this briefly, like how much do we add, as a soil amendment. When you have a clay soil, for a lawn, you would put about 1 inch of compost on once a year, not more often than that. If you are establishing a vegetable garden, for example, you want to put on 2 inches in the first year and then 1 inch and no more in the following years. If you have a sandy soil, you can put in a little bit more in the beginning, but then also definitely cut back. Sandy soils will benefit more from having a tad more compost. And whenever you're planting something, you can add compost to the whole planting area. And don't do it just like the hole. Don't make like a hole that has walls basically, because then the plant roots won't be able to get through there. But make a much bigger area that you mix up, and then you can plant your plants into that area. And I saw that somebody just raised their hands. We're gonna address any Q&A, any questions at the end, or Cameron can help you if it's something that needs to be addressed right now. For lawns, you want to really thinly address that, and then rake it in a bit so that you're not smothering the grass blades actually. So a little less is better for lawns. There's a whole bunch of other soil amendments, and I'm going to touch on just a few of the options. Definitely, I want to point out again, I'll touch on a few of them. As you're going out purchasing any soil amendments, be sure that you research them carefully. And before you spend a lot of money, or before you, if you're not sure if what you're about to purchase is the right thing for your situation, ask the Garden Hotline. They offer free answers anytime. Call them up by phone, email them through their website, and they will help you figure out what works best in your particular situation. So a couple examples of soil amendments are, seed meals are very common. Alfalfa and cotton and flax soil meals are all popular. Basically what that is what's left of the seed, after the processing. So they typically have between 3 and 10% of nitrogen, so they definitely add nitrogen to your soil and your garden. They can be helpful if you get a test back that your soil is really deficient in nitrogen, and seed meals might be an option. You want to make sure that you're not accidentally getting something that has insecticides on it still, because that can actually happen, especially with cotton. Cotton is quite heavily sprayed, and so those seed meals might have a residue. Blood meal and feather meal and fish meal are also options. Blood meal especially is very high in nitrogen. It can deter some critters. It can actually add, it can clump up a little bit if you apply it, and it can possibly start getting moldy. But it is also a good source of fairly high nitrogen. So if you want to add nitrogen, blood meal is an option for sure. And then I'm going to also mention biosolids, so essentially sewage sludge. Our local organization here is Loop. If you've ever driven on I-90, you most likely have seen a Loop truck moving materials from our Puget Sound area over to the Eastern Washington farmers. Biosolids there's a lot of conversations and concerns around that. They are definitely a safe way to provide nutrients depending on how they're produced. Our local organization here that is making Loop is very carefully testing. They are very careful about the processing steps, so I would certainly not be concerned about that. And it's a way to close the circle in a way. So biosolids are definitely an option. There's a lot of information available on them, and so if you're curious about that, go check it out. If you Google Loop, you will find good information from King County about that. Humic acid is another one that is being sold quite a bit as a soil amendment. It's basically it's actually mined. There are areas in this country where humic acid accumulated, and so they're mining them literally. So humic acid is really meant to mimic the humus is another way of expressing organic matter in a way. For a while, the scientists thought that, oh, this is the formula, like humic acid is what humus is, that's the organic matter. Now they're backing off on that. It's actually more complex. It's a good choice for certain applications. Like if you have a greenhouse, for example, or if you have like indoor plants, adding humic acid could be a choice, but it ends up much more expensive than adding compost, because it doesn't add to the organic matter in the same amounts at all. So for small applications, it's a good idea. For larger applications, it's just not cost effective. And then inoculants are another thing that are sold a lot and advertised a lot as soil amendments. And I want to touch on a couple different ones. One type of inoculant that probably most of us are quite familiar with the rhizobia for legumes, you know, like pea inoculants or bean inoculants. And those are really making a difference. And that's because they allow the bacteria, the symbiotic bacteria in the that that are in those little rhizomes. I'm blanking on the English word right now. Sorry. That are in the symbiotic relationship with the legumes that help them attract nitrogen and actually accumulate that. That is happening at a quantity that actually makes a difference. So encouraging that process is definitely a great way to go. Then the mycorrhiza that more and more people are talking about as well, fungi, you know, soil fungi. They are more and more available and added to compost products that you're buying in the bag. And they are really, it really kind of depends on your situation. Can we switch to the next slide? Oh, okay. So with mycorrhiza, let me just finish that. I thought we had another slide about that. It's something that we, thank you, that is talked about a lot. They have a huge, important role in soils now. Instead of purchasing something like that, I would actually, you know, like, then what you're buying and what you're adding to the soil in quantity is nothing compared to what is in the soil environment already. So I would rather bring in good soil and add compost and add good organic matter and make the conditions right for the fungi that you want to attract than buying something and adding that. Okay, let's jump to the next slide. Thank you. So the next couple of slides, Laura, please chime in on that one if you have anything to add to that. A couple resources locally, and there's other places as well. These are just examples of what's available for purchase. Specific Topsource is one local organization here. They sell materials mostly in bulk. Pacific Garden Mulch is one example. It's a yard-based compost. They also provide clean compost mulch that is sawdust and manure mix that you can use as mulch. And on that, I want to add that oftentimes when people are making their own compost, they think that they need to screen that, but that's really something that is not a requirement. Pacific Topsoil also offers cedar chips that can be used as a mulch as well, and then what they call wood chip mulch. That's a mix of yard-based pruning material that is used as a mulch, and then they sell something that they call EnviroMix. That is a mulch and sand mix. So if you happen to really have a heavy clay soil, that would be an option. Or if you're establishing a new area, like if you just have done like a lot of hardscaping and you want to add that around there. And then they have soil mixes. They give them all kinds of names for different specific purposes. Winter Supreme, the 3-layer mix is very popular. Then they have a half and half, and they have long top dressing mixes. Again, you can use that, or you can also, you know, use a little bit of compost for that. So those are all good soil mixes that are available for purchase. They also do sell bark products, but you know, as we mentioned before, bark is not really something that we recommend using in your garden. So yeah, let's check out the next one.
So Reingard, I'm just gonna.
You want to add to? Go ahead.
I'm going to add a little bit here just because Pacific Topsoils, when you look at their website, they will describe these maybe a little differently than we put in here. And one of the reasons we wanted to sort of steer you with these recommendations is because some things work better as mulch and some things are better to add as amendment where you mix it into the soil. They would tell you pretty much that everything they have, except for maybe the bark, can be mixed in, bark and wood chips, that kind of thing. But there are always applications where you can mix those into the soil too, but there's also some things that are better left on top. So for instance, the first two things on this list, they call them both mulch, but you'll notice one has the word compost in it, but that's not a compost as we know it. It is a sawdust and manure blend, which is typically used for top dressing garden beds. So the terms can be confusing the way they've named them, and I just want to be clear with people to understand the difference. Pacific Garden Mulch is actually just yard waste compost like Cedar Grove compost. So understanding that helps you understand what to use them for, and then take into consideration the way they describe things might be a little bit different from what we do. And then all the topsoil mixes, again, these are all things you can top dress a lawn with. You can make your choices based on cost. They do have a mix that's specifically for that. You can use compost, as Reingard said. They all have different uses too, and they make them for different reasons, because some of them are better for garden beds and some are better just for, you know, general fill or different things like that. So keeping that in mind when you look at their products, it might be able to help you a little bit.
Thank you, Laura. Do you want to touch on the, talk about the next two slides actually?
Sure, I could do that.
That would be great.
So this is the Sky Nursery locally available materials list. It's not exhaustive. Obviously, if you've ever been to Sky, you know they have a million things. This photo is just taken right from their website showing some of the composting products that they sell. They sell lots and lots of different things. Getting to know some of the brands that you like makes a difference. Some people prefer one over the other. What kind of soil you have will make a difference as to which thing you choose. If you have very clay soil, using something like the soil building conditioner that you see in the front here could be a good choice, because it's going to help break up that clay soil because it has a little higher wood content in it. And that helps to add a lot more organic matter that's going to break down over time. And in the process, that the microorganisms will help to break the soil up too. The Cedar Grove, you know, is a very common product that we have around the Northwest, and they sell that bagged here as well. They also have a lot of bulk products, and their bulk products also are varied in terms of what you could use them for. The fertile mulch is the same thing as that. Let me go back. That's not working. Well, seem to have lost my back control. But it's the same thing as the mulch I mentioned. That's the sawdust manure blend at Pacific Topsoils. There are a few of those that are sold under different names. So they're sawdust and manure, and that's all that's in them. You might want to, nice thing about Sky is when you go in the store, in the where the checkout area is, there's actually samples that are open. I think they're on the wall, and they have materials like this that you can look at. You can actually get a feel for them. You can look how chunky they are. You can look how much wood content is in them. For me, if I'm putting compost into something like a flower bed or a vegetable bed where I don't want to tie up too much nitrogen, I'm not going to use a product that has a lot of wood in it. So I'm looking for compost that has less wood. In that case, something like earthworm castings would be good, because you can add a little bit of that. It goes a long way as well. So Sky's a great place to go and kind of get a feel for what's out there. And I like that a lot, that you have that option. And then, of course, Home Depot, lots of people shop there. They have quite a range of things. They don't have the Cedar Grove. They used to have Cedar Grove and the Black Gold products. I don't see them there as much anymore. They do a lot of Miracle Grow now, which has some natural soil products. So they typically are a chemical fertilizer, but they have also started making some natural and organic products as well. They do have in the bagged soil department, Fox Farm, which is a natural soil. And then that living soil also has some, I think, mycorrhiza and different things that they've added to it. What's online may differ from what's available in the store, but you can check the websites and see if they have it there. They do sell some bulk soils as well and some bulk mulch. And those are a little bit less, there's less variety in those, and it's going to vary by where you live. You notice that even just the soil pictures in this, this is directly off their website, how different the colors are of the soil, and that's because they're coming from different places. And so I don't know exactly what they sell in this area. It could be that they are selling similar products to what Pacific Topsoil has, but you can always ask them directly, you know, if they know where their materials come from. What I did like about Home Depot is they had some interesting composts. They have some things from Gardens Alive. They have some biochar, which is something that's harder to find. And they do sell earthworm castings as well. So they have a nice variety of compost, which I was pleased to see. And then in the bag mulch department, they have more than the coconut coir, but the coconut coir is something I wanted to mention. They also have peat moss, which we would not recommend that product either, because it's not only is it sourced from bogs and it's not replenishable, but it can be really water repellent if used incorrectly. So as it dries out, it can be hydrophobic, and then your plants won't get the water that they need. So you want to be careful when you're using products like that, when you're mixing them into soil or putting them on top of the soil in particular. And coconut coir is a kind of a substitute for peat moss, which is used more commonly these days. That can actually hold quite a bit of water, and that's why they're both used. Peat and coconut coir can hold water, but again, can be hydrophobic if it dries out too much. And then we included this slide because, as Cameron mentioned, there are lots of products that people use that we would prefer people didn't use, and sometimes people stop using them before they have actually finished using the bottle. Don't feel bad about that. Just take it to the hazardous waste disposal locations. And the one in North Seattle is up by Haller Lake, very easy to do. No questions asked, just drop it off. And then thinking about what you have on hand, the things that we're trying to steer you towards are natural products. You could have things that you are using right now for amending your soil, or say somebody's using something like weed and feed to fertilize their lawn, and you decide that you don't want to use it anymore. Those are things that you can, instead of using it up, you can take it and dispose of it. Sometimes it's just old pesticides as well.
Thank you. That was great. Laura was just talking about, you can definitely go out and purchase those products. But oftentimes you might actually have what you need at home. And so then in the next section, I'm going to talk about composting at home. And, first of all, why do we do it? Well, cost is one reason. If we do have materials at home that we can compost and then apply that, then we don't need to send stuff off through the city yard waste and then go out and buy materials to bring them back in. Compost builds healthy soil, and healthy soil means healthy plants. So your plants are going to benefit from that. The compost you apply will be food for growing plants. It will help conserve water, which means that your plants will have more consistent water available more consistently. Compost will help suppress plant diseases also. And if you made it yourself, you know exactly what's in it. So lots of benefits to doing it at home and doing it yourself. And so let's see what the next slide says and how we're gonna go about it. So if you have thought about, have been thinking about making compost at home, and there's a lot of options out there. And so choosing the right system that's right for you and your situation is important, because if it doesn't suit us, then we're not likely to keep doing something. The first question to look at is like, are you going to only make compost of yard waste, or are you gonna include food waste in that? The main reason why we look at that is rats. We have two kinds of rats in this area, and they're definitely a problem and a public health issue. We do not want to encourage rats living in our compost piles, and we don't want to feed rats. So there's options. We're going to talk about what to do if you have food waste that you want to use. But yeah, and then, how much space do you have? How much waste do you have? How big is your garden? What kind of waste, garden yard waste do you have? And how much time and effort and money do you want to put into this? So let's go. So this slide shows a range of different setups, from really fairly big to smaller. On the very right is a portion of a 3-bin system that our website at tiltalliance.org has plans for. In the top center is a system that is much larger, can be any size really, that's made out of concrete bricks essentially. In the center, that one is just built out of old pallets, so somebody probably didn't pay a dime for any of that. And then on the left side, you see on the top is something that's called the Seattle Composter. That is available for the Seattle Conservation Corps. And at the bottom is something that is more commercially available, a plastic bin that to me is a bit on the smaller side. Size does matter a little bit when you build compost, and 3 by 3 by 3 is kind of the minimum to get the temperature and the conditions so that you can have that the microbes have the conditions that they need. So let's look at the next one. So I was talking about yard waste versus food waste, so let's talk about yard waste first. If you're building a compost pile out of your yard waste, you basically want to mix 2 different types of materials. We simplify talking about them by calling them the browns and the greens, with browns being, like the word suggests, being leaves, dried leaves, any short twigs or wood prunings that are not too big and long. Straw and hay would fall into that. Sawdust, newspaper, shred paper, soiled paper, like, paper towels, would all fall into browns. And that is because they don't have a high content of nitrogen, which is really what we're trying to balance here, the content between carbons and nitrogen. Greens is any green plant tissue. So, your grass clippings for sure, green leaves, stems as you're pulling weeds. And then also greens, even though in color they're brown, are coffee grounds. They're rich in nitrogen. So they're definitely greens. They're super cool to add. And then manure as well, animal waste. Feather, bone, blood as well, but most of us don't really necessarily have access to that or want to use that in our backyard also. But my absolute favorite is rabbit poop. That's just great stuff. It's the only one that you don't need to let sit for a long time. With chicken manure, you want to wait at least 6 months. With rabbits, that's not necessary. So there's definitely an advantage to that. Okay, let's look at the next one. So those are the main ingredients, right? That's the material, the browns and the greens. But then also you want to make sure that your pile has the right moisture level. So you need to add water. And basically what we want is a moisture of like a wrung out sponge. When we first build a compost pile, I'd say like it's still kind of like on the wetter side of wrung out sponge, but you can't squeeze out a few, you know, a few drops if you really want to. And then you want to make sure that there's enough air that, you know, your pile is not like totally packed up, but also you don't want it too fluffy. And that's why you want to make sure that your pieces are about an inch or two. If you have really long, like you know, you're pulling out your kale plant, for example, and you have a big stalk, then you want to chop that down. Otherwise, you have too much air and not enough room for the microbes to start working on that material. So this yellow highlight again, you know, points out that just like in soil, you want to have that pore space and room for water. And like I mentioned earlier, you want to have at least a 3x3x3. Another kind of system to build your own compost, this one is actually going to be much richer, is if you have a lot of food waste, you might want to consider actually starting a worm bin. That is feasible in much smaller volumes. You can definitely do that on a smaller scale. You can also do it in the garage or even on the kitchen sink if you want. These bins are different models. The top left is a larger wood chest type. We have the plans for building that out of wood on our website. The top center shows an example for a commercial system, a stack system where you fill the bottom tray and then you fill the next one and the next one and the next one, and at the end, ideally the bottom one is completed and you can use that. And then of course that handful is just showing you a handful of worms. They're the red wiggler worms. They're specifically used for composting. They would not thrive in the soil. They do not burrow. These need a rich organic matter environment, so they live in essentially food waste. And bedding. And bedding can be newspapers or leaves, like shown in this picture there. And so really, to feed your compost worms, if you want to do that, you want to have about 80% bedding. You're going to start filling your container up with bedding and then adding food waste as you go. And then really anything that is considered vegan would be a good choice for your worm bin. Worms actually don't mind eating meat and dairy products also, but they break down too slowly and they attract rats, which is why we do not want them in there. And of course, no plastic or, no stickers. If you, pull those stickers off off your vegetables when you work in the kitchen, because otherwise you're going to have to pull them out of the worm bin or your compost bin, and that's much harder to do. And also, please pull off those stickers. I'm going to step on my soapbox here for a second. Pull off those stickers also before you put food scraps into your yard waste bin, because otherwise you're going to end up buying them back when you buy your compost bags from Cedar Grove, for example. Let's keep those stickers out. This image here is showing us other options. If you have a lot of food waste, not a lot of space in the garden, you don't want to really, start a compost operation. You can still make soil slash compost out of your food waste by using either a green cone, which is available through the Seattle Conservation Corps, or if you're up for building something yourself, just take a metal trash can, make a hole in the garden that fits it, and before you put the trash can in, poke, drill holes into the bottom area that are big enough for worms to crawl through, but too small for rats. And then put your food scraps in there, put a lid on it with a bunch of cords, and that's the most reliable in keeping rats out of all the systems that we have. And you can just add to it. So, so with that, we're at the end of what we can share with you all today. The resources again that I mentioned throughout the talk are at the beginning, the King Conservation District Soil Test website. And then Cameron, jump in, feel free to jump in anytime. And then I'm listing a couple brochures for you there that we have available. The Composting Yard and Food Waste at Home is one. The Growing Healthy Soil is another one. They have great examples, good photos, very detailed descriptions of all these processes, and they're available through the Garden Hotline and on the SPU website as well. Soils for salmon, I mentioned that. Chip drop for getting on the list for a free delivery of wood chips. The Tilt Alliance has a maritime gardening guide, which is always a great resource for gardening around here. I have a dog-eared, like almost falling apart copy of it on my kitchen counter at all times. And then the building plans for the different things that I mentioned for building compost and in the warm bins. So yeah, cool. With that, I'm gonna hand the mic back to Cameron.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Reingard. Really appreciate it. Yeah, so I do want to really quick, because you've stuck around to the end, everybody, I want to, before we go to QA, I want to do our quick poll for the raffle. So if you're interested in getting that yard of compost and now you know exactly how to use it and why it's so great, I'm going to launch this poll. So the caveat is you have to be a shoreline resident and you need room like either in a driveway or an area on your property, so not in the city right of way or city street. So if you want the compost, I'm going to launch this poll and just punch yes if you want it. And I'll announce the winners tomorrow. And while we're doing that, I'll leave that open here till everybody votes. Let's go to some QA. So first question here up at the beginning was from Darlene, who says she has an electric aerated compost tea maker that she hasn't used for a number of years. She's wondering, is this useful? If yes, she used to purchase these little packets, but she's wondering, if there's something she could use from scratch.
Oh yeah, compost tea is great. That's a great question. It's definitely taking it a step further. Without knowing exactly which model you have, but you can make compost tea out of any compost. It's really an extraction process. For the most part, you definitely want to have enough air in there so that the microbes that you're pulling out are not dying on you. And usually you want to stick to no longer than 24 hours. Some people are staying longer, but I would definitely do that. I'm not sure what you think is in the bags, but it's not necessary to add anything. If you have a good batch of compost, use that. You can actually go so far and do the same thing with if you have a handful of super great soil, you can do the same thing. And the benefit is that you then, you're applying those desired microbes to the area you want them to move into.
Awesome. Thank you. Next one is, where would you advise using earthworm castings? Yeah, I didn't actually say that. So the castings, or worm castings, the first thing I should add to that is that they're much more concentrated than your typical compost. So you are going to use them in much, much smaller quantities. And as in, think of like a teaspoon to a tablespoon per plant. If you're applying it directly to the garden,
I have sometimes actually added worm castings, mixed them in with my compost and spread them thinly that way. If you have an area where you want your soil to become, if you have an area that's really, let's say, kind of sandy, then you might want to mix worm castings in with some compost and apply that. That will help develop that tilth. So the worm castings, if you touch them, actually, like if you get like compost, it doesn't make your hands dirty. If you touch worm castings, it's sticking to your skin. It's like sticking in your, like, yeah, it has a different stickiness to it. And so you can use that to your benefit in your garden wherever you want to build that tilth up, but much smaller quantities. It's concentrated.
Awesome. Thanks. And yeah, we have about, I think, 8 or 9 10-pound bags will be given away. So the next question, also on worms, is it important to buy red wigglers rather than regular earthworms for your compost? I'm assuming that's for a like a food waste composting system. My daughter says that earthworms are great aerators, but don't do as good digesting the yard waste.
Yes, that's correct. So the red wiggle, they're different kinds, they're different species. They have different habits and requirements for what environment they live in. The earthworms that are in the soil, they burrow, they go up and down, they build tunnels up and down and every which way. The red wigglers wouldn't actually burrow into the soil. They stay on the very top. In the natural environments, they would stay on the very top in the organic matter layer. So they need that rich organic matter. I mean, they will thrive in manure, for example, but they will not go down into the soil. They need that richness to really thrive.
Gotcha. Okay, and then going back to one, somebody was asking, is it for lawns, if you're top dressing lawns with compost, it was 1/4 to 1/2 inch, is that correct?
Yeah, not more than that. I wouldn't do more than that.
Okay.
Yeah, you want to be able to really rake it in.
Gotcha. Right.
You want those grass clippings, or you want the grass to stick up above it. You're not trying to smother your grass. In other words, you want to see the grass through it.
Right. Thanks. Okay. Best compost / mulch for acid-loving plants like rhodies.
Do you want to say something to that, Laura?
Any kind of wood chip mulch would be fine for a rhododendron. Rhodies are pretty shallow rooted. They like, our soils in the Northwest are more fungal than they are bacterial. So that fungal interaction that can happen with wood chips and soil is a good thing for them. So I prefer wood chip mulch for a rhododendron myself personally.
Awesome, thanks. Another one on landscaping beds. In the fall, I like to put my shredded leaves and grass clippings on flower beds. What is the best combination of these to apply?
I would say, use what you have. If you have grass clip, it depends on the timing as well, I would say, a little bit, you want to do it all at once. If you have an area that is a bit more annuals, then that's where I would put the grass clippings. And the leaves I would put more towards the shrubs and the trees.
Gotcha.
If you don't have that kind of distinction, you can also mix them in with each other. At this time of the year, you probably want to see if you can actually have the grass clippings spread out a bit, so that they don't like totally mess up things.
Okay, and then a request, Laura, are you able to actually pull up the slide again that had the how to use compost?
Yeah, just a moment.
Okay, and then while she's doing that, back on the worms, for the bedding, can you use regular office shredded paper in your composter?
Yes, I do that all the time. The only thing, and that's true for any composting, whether that's the worms or not, the paper you want to stay away from is any of the glossy stuff. You know, like the mailings that come, that the advertising that is really glossy. If it feels plasticky to your hand rather than papery, then no, don't use it. Or, you know, that cardboard box for your plasma TV screen that's all colorful, put that in the recycling.
Right.
But, you know, plain cardboard, we didn't talk about that much, but that or newspaper, those would all be great to use. Regular office paper is perfectly fine.
Okay. Yeah. So just making sure there's no plastic coatings in there.
Yeah.
Great. So I think.
Is this the right slide?
I believe so.
Okay.
Michelle, was this the slide you're looking for? Yeah, so that's great. Just has the different recommendations there. So that's all of our questions.
Yeah, take a screenshot.
Yeah, and I will be sending this out. As I mentioned, we'll send out the recording here so you can, you know, zoom around on the recording to your heart's content. That's all I got. I'll just share my screen briefly again to show the next. Yeah, that's correct. So for the soil amendment and clay soils, it says 1 inch. But if you're doing that on a lawn, you would not want to go more than ½ inch. Sounds like.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to share this back again really quick, just to show what's next up. So thank you so much, Reingard and Laura. Really appreciate the talk tonight. And just wanted to show, so next, we'll be back same time next week to dive a little deeper into some design aspects when we're looking at, you know, we want to really create a different type of bed. Maybe you're pulling out a lawn space and you want to convert it to a more Pacific Northwest feeling garden space, landscape space. And we'll dive into native plants as well. And then on the 21st, we'll do the last one, and that's really a fall cleanup, prep, kind of everything you need to winterize your garden and really set it up for success in the spring. So thank you both, and thank you everybody for joining us here tonight. And yeah, we hope this was a really good time. And like I said, I'll announce the other raffle winners and everything in the email and send out the links and the information for the Garden Hotline tomorrow. So look out for that from me tomorrow. Thank you all, and have a great night.
Thanks, Cameron.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great job, Reingard. And we'll, Laura, we can be in touch. I'll be out next on Monday, but yeah, just whenever you have the next slides, that'd be great.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you. Next time we'll see you.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye.